Grandma looked across the dinner table, her fork hovering in the air, and asked me, "Is the $2,500 I send you every month enough?" My chest tightened because I had no idea what she was talking about. So I said, "What money?" And in that instant, the entire room froze. The knife in my father's hand stopped midair. My mother's face drained white. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. And then my grandmother turned to my parents and said 7 words that shattered the life I thought I knew forever. "I'm Noah Bennett, and this is my story. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reached. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if you find my story worth hearing, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every click helps my voice be heard, helps stories like mine not be forgotten, and maybe just maybe reminds the world that people like me matter too." The table looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine roast chicken glistening under the yellow glow of the chandelier candles flickering beside polished wine glasses, the scent of rosemary and butter heavy in the air. My mother Linda had orchestrated every detail as if the Bennetts were the picture of perfection. My father Robert tried on his smile like a suit that never quite fit. My brother Derek barely looked up from his phone. And me, Noah, 31 years old and still somehow the background character at my own family's table, sat at the far end, small in a room that wasn't supposed to make me feel that way. I had one goal: get through the night quietly. No sparks, no tension, just swallow the food, fake the pleasantries, and hope the ticking clock on the wall would hurry us toward the end. Then Evelyn, my grandmother, broke the script. She had brought her famous apple pie and that old leather notebook she carried everywhere, but when she spoke, her voice cut through the air sharper than the carving knife in my father's hand. "Noah," she asked, evenly, almost casually, "is the $2,500 I send you every month enough?" The fork nearly slipped from my hand. Heat flushed through my chest. "What money?" I asked before I could stop myself. Silence thundered in its place. My father's knife froze mid-slice suspended over the chicken. My mother's spoon clattered against the bowl. Derek smirked as if he'd been waiting for this train wreck to happen. Grandma's eyes swept across the table, lingering on each of them before returning to me, and then she turned fully to my parents. Her voice was calm, but each word landed like a blow. "Where did my grandson's money go?" The room tilted. My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Betrayal settled like ice in my bones. My mother scrambled for words, muttering something about family expenses. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek shrugged, scrolling as if none of this mattered. In that moment, I knew the hardships I'd swallowed: late-night shifts, worn-out clothes, second-hand textbooks, weren't just bad luck. Someone had stolen what was meant for me. The roast chicken cooled on its platter. The candles still burned, but the illusion of warmth had collapsed. I heard only the steady tick of the clock counting down to a reckoning none of us could avoid. After dinner, Grandma touched my arm and guided me down the dim hallway. The smell of her apple pie lingered faintly, a comfort against the storm in my chest. She pulled the leather notebook from her bag, flipped through pages of neat handwriting, and held it open under the weak light. Line after line showed transfers $2,500 each month for nearly 4 years. My voice cracked. "Who did you send it to?" She looked at me with those steady eyes. "To your parents, Noah. Every note said the same thing: for your education, you're living for you." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. For years, I'd worked late shifts, tutoring kids, walked around in threadbare jeans, begged off buying new shoes. I thought it was because I wasn't worth more. But here it was proof that I had been worth it, that someone had believed in me enough to send help I never saw. My grandmother's voice softened, but the edge of anger was there. "You are worth more than every dollar in this notebook." The words pierced me deeper than the silence at dinner. Before I could answer, a shadow moved at the end of the hallway. My mother. Her voice was low, but the steel in it made my skin prickle. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said coldly. "That money was for the family, not just you." The floor seemed to shift under my feet. She wasn't even denying it, just twisting it, making my future sound like selfishness. Grandma stepped closer, shielding me with her presence, but I could still feel my mother's gaze like a blade. Later that night, Grandma insisted on sleeping in the living room, her quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes open long after the lights went out. I lay awake in my small, drafty room, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening. Through the thin walls, I heard my mother's whisper, sharp and frantic. "If she keeps digging, we'll lose everything." My father's low murmur answered, though I couldn't make out the words. I pulled the blanket tighter, but no warmth reached me. For the first time, I wondered if the love I thought bound this house together had always been conditional, if my place here had only ever been borrowed. The ticking of the clock in the hall grew louder in the dark, marking the time until everything would unravel. In the morning, I asked Grandma, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. "Can we look at every paper tomorrow?" She nodded firmly. "We'll start with the bank." And with that promise, the line was drawn. There would be no turning back. The next morning, the kitchen was filled with sharp light that exposed every corner, every shadow, nothing left to hide behind. Grandma brewed her tea at the counter, her movements calm but deliberate, like someone preparing for battle. My father sat at the table with dark circles under his eyes, rubbing his temples as if the night had aged him 12 years. My mother stood with her arms crossed, her stance rigid, her eyes already defensive. Derek stumbled down the stairs with a yawn, his phone still in hand, glancing at me with that same careless smirk. Grandma didn't waste time. Her voice was even but firm. "List every dollar. Where it went, no excuses." For a moment, no one spoke. My father's shoulders sagged before he muttered, "Tuition for Derek, the down payment on his car, the apartment rent, a trip to the San Juan Islands last year." His words fell like stones, each one heavier than the last. My mother snapped before I could react. "Noah is smart enough to earn a scholarship. He'll be fine." But Derek needed the support. He had to look the part if he was going to succeed. Her tone turned cutting, as though reason itself was on her side. I clenched my jaw, but Grandma's hand brushed mine under the table, a reminder to hold steady. Instead of yelling, I stood and walked with her to the study. We opened the old wooden drawers of my father's desk, the smell of dust and ink rising. Inside were folders, receipts, envelopes crammed with bank slips. I sifted through pages until the words leapt out at me. Derek tuition, car, payment, apartment allowance. There it was in black and white. Grandma instructed me to copy everything. We fed the pages through the rattling machine in the corner. The paper came out warm, smelling faintly of ink and iron. As the pile of evidence grew, I felt my pulse slow. For once, the truth was no longer invisible. Then my eyes caught on other entries buried deeper in the stack. Spring break, Seabreeze Resort executive detailing auto premium car insurance. Derek extravagance, hidden under the guise of family needs. My hands shook as I turned another page and saw my own name, typed neatly recurring donation, in name of Noah Bennett. They had used me, not just my future, but my name polishing their image of generosity while I lived in patched-up clothes. I felt the room tilt. Before I could speak, Derek strolled past the doorway, glanced at the papers in my hand, and said with a shrug, "Get over it." The words ignited a fire in my chest, but Grandma rose her back straight, her voice sharp. "You will not speak to him that way." For the first time in this house, someone defended me out loud. The balance shifted, if only slightly, and I felt it. The shame and envy of my past years swirled, threatening to drown me. But I gripped the edge of the desk and steadied myself. In my notebook, I wrote a single line. "Truth doesn't need permission." That sentence became my anchor. When the copies were stacked high, Grandma picked up the phone and called Michael Turner, her lawyer in Seattle. She scheduled an appointment. Her tone clipped no hesitation. My father, pale and weary, pleaded, "Don't make this bigger than it is. We can settle it as a family." My mother snapped, "You'll tear this family apart, Noah." I looked at them at the wreckage of their excuses and answered quietly, "If the truth tears it apart, then it was already broken." My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Derek lit the screen. "Come home now. We need to talk." I met Grandma's eyes. We both knew this wasn't over. It was only about to escalate. The drive to Seattle was silent, the hum of the tires on the highway the only sound. I sat beside Grandma, clutching the folder of documents, every copy of weapon we hadn't known we'd need. By the time we stepped into Michael Turner's office, my stomach was in knots. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and lemon oil. Tall shelves lined the walls, heavy with law books. Light streamed through the blinds, harsh and cold. Mr. Turner greeted us with a firm handshake and ushered us to sit. He adjusted his glasses and began leafing through the stack of papers. Minutes stretched. He read line after line, sometimes pausing, sometimes scribbling notes. Finally, he looked up, his voice steady. "This is misuse of funds, clear as day. If you want to pursue it, this could fall under fraud. Charges can be filed." The words hit me with equal parts relief and dread. Fraud. My own parents. My chest ached with the weight of it. Grandma's hand rested on mine, grounding me. Turner continued, "You have every right to demand repayment restitution, but you should know once this becomes public it won't be quiet. The family will fracture in ways that cannot be undone." I nodded slowly, torn between fear and the undeniable pull of justice. Then his pen tapped against one line on the statement. "This here recurring donations listed under the name of Noah Bennett. These were never authorized by you, correct?" I leaned forward, reading the words again. Anger burning in my throat. My name tied to charitable giving I had never made. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had painted me as their mask of virtue. While I sat in freezing rooms and ate leftovers, they polished their reputation on my back. The bile rose in my throat. Grandma's jaw tightened. They used his name to pretend they were honorable while stripping him of his future. She said, her voice sharp as a blade. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Derek flashed on the screen. "Come home now. We need to talk." I stared at it, torn. Part of me knew this was a trap, another performance where I'd be cornered and blamed. But another part of me, the part that had survived years of silence, wanted the confrontation, wanted to look him in the eye, and refused to shrink. I slid the phone back into my pocket, my pulse quickening. "We'll go back," I told Grandma, not to yield to face it. She studied me, then nodded resolve matching mine. "We'll bring the copies. Let them know we're not afraid." As we left Michael Turner's office, the weight of the folder pressed against my arm, heavier than any burden I'd carried, yet strangely lighter, too. For the first time, I wasn't just bracing for survival. I was preparing to fight. The highway stretched back toward Maple Glen, the town where everything had begun and where everything was about to change. I could already feel the battle lines forming. This time I would not stay silent. The house looked different in the late afternoon glow, as if the setting sun itself was exposing cracks that had always been there. Golden light filtered through the blinds, casting bars across the living room, where we all stood like prisoners of our own making. My father sat slumped in his chair, silent, his drink untouched on the table. My mother stood at the door as though guarding it. Her shoulders stiff, her jaw set. Derek leaned against the staircase with his arms folded, smirking like he owned the place. I set the folder down on the table and opened it, my hands steady though my chest burned. One by one, I read the statements aloud. Car payment, apartment allowance, premium insurance, spring break at Seabreeze Resort. My voice cut through the silence louder with each word. Every dollar meant for me was spent on Derek. Grandma's voice followed mine, sharp and unwavering. This money was Noah's. You stole from him to indulge your other son. Derek let out a laugh, a dry, cruel sound. Yeah, I knew it came from Grandma, but I figured it was for all of us. And honestly, I deserved it more. His words struck me harder than any blow. My own brother didn't just take what was mine. He believed I had no right to it at all. To him, I was an afterthought, a shadow. Before I could speak, my father lifted his head. His eyes were tired, his voice heavy. You're strong, Noah. You'll stand on your own feet. Derek needed it more. He can't survive without help. That admission shattered something inside me. Years of trying to earn his approval collapsed into dust. I wasn't the strong one. I was the disposable one. Heat surged through me, words erupting from a place I didn't know I had. If the truth is what breaks this family, then you broke it long before I said a word. The silence that followed was unbearable. My mother's lips trembled. My father stared at the floor, and Derek just rolled his eyes. Grandma gripped my hand and pulled me toward the door. Behind us, the house seemed to sag under the weight of everything unsaid. The Bennett home wasn't whole anymore. It was fractured, the pieces never fitting back together again. That night felt like living inside an open grave. The house was dim, the air heavy with dread. My mother wept quietly in the kitchen, her sobs drifting down the hallway like echoes. My father poured drink after drink, his glass clinking against the bottle. Derek paced the living room, restless, muttering under his breath. Upstairs, I packed my few belongings into a small suitcase, folding shirts in silence, touching the walls that had once felt familiar, but now seemed like strangers' walls, cracked and cold. Grandma worked steadily in the guest room, stacking documents into neat piles, preparing them for the lawyer. The next morning, she was focused, relentless, the only pillar holding steady in a house that was crumbling. My father came to my doorway, his voice low, almost pleading. If you leave with her, the whole town will know. Friends, the church, they'll all judge us. They'll never look at us the same. His words carried the weight of shame, but none of remorse. I said nothing, though. Inside me, anger coiled tighter with every syllable. Then my mother burst in, her face streaked with tears. You're tearing this family apart. Think about me sick with worry. Think about your father losing his standing. Think about Derek's future. You're ruining everything. She spoke as though I were the villain, the one who had burned down the house when all I'd done was point at the flames. Before I could answer, Derek slammed his car keys onto the table, the metallic sound cutting through the room. His voice was sharp, venomous. If Grandma cuts me out of the will, I'll never forgive you. Noah, you're stealing everything from me. His eyes blazed with something I had never seen before. Not brotherhood, not even rivalry, but pure resentment. To him, I was not family. I was an obstacle. Grandma stood tall, her presence commanding. If Derek doesn't apologize tonight, I'll strike him from the will completely, permanently. Her words carried finality, each syllable heavy with power. Derek froze, his face paling, but instead of apologizing, he sneered, stormed toward the door, and slammed it so hard the walls rattled. I turned to face my parents one last time. My voice shook, but it was firm. I can't trust either of you anymore. I'm leaving. My mother collapsed into sobs, clutching her face. My father lowered his head, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the truth had finally crushed him. I walked past them, suitcase in hand, Grandma at my side, carrying the files that told the story of every theft, every betrayal. As we stepped out into the cool night, I glanced back. The Bennett house loomed in the dark, its windows glowing faintly, but it no longer felt like home. It was a place of loss of secrets of love I could no longer believe in. I slid into the passenger seat of Grandma's car. She started the engine, her jaw set with determination. The house shrank in the rear-view mirror as we pulled away until it was just a shadow against the night sky. My chest ached, but a strange lightness spread through me too. For the first time, I wasn't just leaving. I was choosing. And I knew the fight ahead wasn't just for family. It was for justice. The next morning, Seattle streets felt sharper, the air colder. As I walked with Grandma into Michael Turner's office, the space was clean and heavy with quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against your chest. The long, dark table gleamed under the sterile white lights, and every chair seemed too large, too upright. I clutched the folder of copies against my ribs like a shield. Grandma's eyes never wavered. We had barely settled when the door opened. My parents came in without invitation, their faces drawn tight, pale with tension. Derek followed, his chin tilted upward, his swagger exaggerated as if the weight of the world had never once pressed on his shoulders. The room shrank. The air pulled taut like a string ready to snap. Turner began with measured calm, his pen tapping against the legal pad. Let's proceed carefully. Facts first, explanations after. He gestured toward Grandma. Without hesitation, she laid out the stack of statements, page after page, sliding across the polished wood. Every cent left my account. She said, her voice cold, intended for Noah. I leaned forward, my throat tight. 4 years, 48 months. While I wore hand-me-downs, while I worked nights to afford used textbooks, while I felt like nothing I was told there was no money. And yet Derek had a car, vacations, and apartment. Why? The words tore out of me. My father lifted his head, his eyes wet with something that wasn't quite shame. We did it to preserve this family's image. If Derek failed, if he looked small, we'd lose our standing. You are stronger, Noah. You could endure. You could sacrifice. Sacrifice. The word hollowed me out. I had never been a son to him, just a tool to be carved down for appearances. My mother leaned in sharply, her voice cutting. You won't dare drag this to court. Do you understand what it would mean if you expose this? You'll be the one who destroyed us. Not us. You. Her eyes blazed, rewriting the story, painting me the villain for demanding what was mine. Before I could answer, Derek straightened and let out a scoff. If Grandma cuts me from the will, I'll make sure everyone knows Noah is a fraud, that he never made it on his own, that he's just been leeching off her. Let's see how far you get then, brother. His words were gasoline poured on the fire already burning inside me. I rose from my chair, every nerve in my body alive. My voice shook, but it carried. I don't want your fake honor. I don't want pity. I don't even want a place in any will. All I want is truth on paper that money was mine and you stole it. The room crackled with silence. Then Turner tapped his pen firmly against the desk. Everything here is clear. If Noah chooses, these records can be submitted as evidence today. For a moment, no one moved. My parents looked smaller than I'd ever seen them. Derek's jaw worked, but he said nothing. Grandma's hand rested over mine, steady and proud. In her eyes, I saw no pity, only fierce certainty. I realized then that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I was no longer the quiet son in the shadows. I was standing on my own ground. The following morning, the air in Maple Glen carried the crispness of beginnings. Sunlight slipped through Grandma's kitchen curtains, casting golden stripes across the table where the smell of cinnamon and apples lingered. My suitcase sat by the door, small but heavy with the weight of a lifetime. Today, I would leave this town behind and move into her home, no longer tethered to the wreckage of my parents' choices. I folded the last of my clothes when a knock rattled the doorframe. My mother stood there, her eyes swollen, her voice trembling. Noah, don't do this. Don't ruin the family. Please, come home. Behind her, my father lingered on the porch, his silence louder than any plea. His shoulders slouched in quiet defeat. I steadied my breath. The family was ruined when you stole from your own son. This isn't my doing. It's yours. Her hands reached out, desperate, bargaining. We'll pay some of it back slowly. Just don't take it further. Don't shame us. And there it was, the truth laid bare. Not remorse, not love, just fear of humiliation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Derek. You've taken everything from me, but you'll never succeed. You'll always be my shadow. I stared at the words for a long moment before pressing delete. His poison no longer had a place in me. Grandma appeared behind me, her presence filling the doorway. She looked at my parents with steel in her voice. From this day on, Noah lives with me. His future will no longer be bound by your greed. And hear me now. If you ever try to harm him again, I will use every means the law provides. Her words landed like a final judgment. My mother collapsed into tears. My father lowered his head, saying nothing, and I stepped past them, suitcase in hand, feeling a strange mix of sorrow and relief. That night, safe in Grandma's home, I spread out the college brochures I'd once hidden away, too ashamed to hope for. With the documents beside me, I filled out applications, my hand steady as I wrote my name. In my journal, I wrote a single line. This life belongs to me. No one can take it back. Days later, I sat in a small cafe in town, the morning sun pouring through the window as I signed my graduate program enrollment form. I looked at my reflection in the glass, tired, scarred, but smiling. For the first time, I wasn't living in the shadows. The Bennett family still existed somewhere in Maple Glen, fractured and raw. But I had stepped free. The truth had been dragged into the light, and I was no longer afraid of it. Whatever came next, it would be on my terms. My story was mine to write. The first days at Grandma Evelyn's house carried a silence that was different from the Bennett home. It wasn't heavy or accusing. It was the quiet of safety. The old clock in her kitchen ticked calmly, not like a countdown to an explosion, but like a steady rhythm guiding me forward. I unpacked the small suitcase I had brought, lining my few belongings neatly in the dresser she cleared for me. It felt strange starting over in a room that smelled of lavender and fresh linens instead of dust and neglect. Still, the echoes of Maple Glen followed me. The memory of my mother's cries, my father's bowed head, and Derek's threats haunted the edges of my sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his words. You'll always be my shadow. They rattled in my chest like loose stones. I had walked away, but pieces of their control still clung to me. Grandma noticed. She always did. One evening, while the kettle whistled softly, she placed a hand on my shoulder. Healing doesn't happen just because you leave Noah. It takes facing what still lives inside you. The shame, the anger they'll try to follow. But you decide if they stay. The next morning, we drove back into town, not to the Bennett house, but to the courthouse. Michael Turner met us there with the folder of evidence. We sat in a small conference room where the smell of coffee and floor polish mingled. He explained each step: the filing of restitution claims, the possibility of a fraud case, the protection of my name against unauthorized use in donations. My hands trembled as I signed the forms, but with each signature I felt a layer of their grip peel away. News spread quickly in Maple Glen. By the weekend, whispers filled the diner and the church steps. People who had once smiled politely now exchanged glances when my parents walked by. It wasn't my doing. It was the truth. Finally, out in daylight, tearing away the mask they had worn for so long. One afternoon, as I left the cafe where I had been filling out my graduate application, Derek was waiting outside. His car gleamed at the curb, the same car I had unknowingly paid for. He leaned against it, arms crossed, his jaw clenched. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked cornered. "You've ruined us," he spat. His voice cracked at the edges, a mix of fury and something like fear. "Everyone knows now. Do you have any idea what it's like to walk into class and feel them staring? You think you've won, but you've burned everything down." I steadied my breath, meeting his glare. "I didn't burn it. I just stopped covering the fire you set." For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw the pressure that had always weighed on him, the need to shine to uphold the family's image. But instead of admitting it, he sneered. "You'll never make it. You don't belong anywhere without us." Then he slid into his car and sped away, leaving exhaust and bitterness behind. That night, I sat on Grandma's porch with the cool wind brushing my face. I realized Derek's words no longer pierced the way they used to. He was trapped in the cage my parents built for him. Image, expectation, favoritism. I had walked out. That was the difference. A week later, Michael Turner called with news a settlement had been reached. My parents agreed to restitution rather than face public trial. Funds would be returned directly to an account in my name managed under Grandma's supervision until I was ready to handle it fully. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about reclaiming what had been stolen. Not just dollars, but dignity. I didn't attend the meeting where they signed the papers. I didn't need to. Grandma went in my place, her presence enough to remind them of their failure. When she returned, she handed me the official documents. "It's done," she said simply. I opened the envelope and felt the weight of the paper. Legal proof. My parents' signatures admitting to what they had taken. For the first time, I had something solid, something undeniable. That night I wrote in my journal, "The truth is mine now. No one can rewrite it." The following weekend, I boarded a bus with Grandma to tour the campus of the graduate program I had once only dreamed of. The halls buzzed with students, backpacks slung over their shoulders, voices full of purpose. I felt out of place at first, older, worn down by years of silence and struggle. But then I remembered every night I had stayed awake tutoring every shift I had worked to buy secondhand books. I had already lived through harder tests than any classroom could give me. As we left the campus, Grandma squeezed my hand. "This is where you start, Noah. Not where you hide, not where you beg, but where you stand." On the ride back, I stared out the window as the landscape blurred. For the first time, the future didn't look like a punishment or a gamble. It looked like a horizon waiting for me. The Bennett house still stood in Maple Glen, cracked and dim with my parents inside nursing their shame, and Derek still clinging to what was slipping through his fingers. But that house no longer held me. I had carried my story out of its walls and into the world. One evening, weeks later, I sat again in the cafe where it had all begun, the sun slanting through the glass. I spread out my acceptance letter on the table, the words clear and undeniable. "Welcome to the program." My chest tightened not with fear, but with a strange, overwhelming gratitude. I closed my eyes, hearing the echo of Grandma's words. "You are worth more than every dollar in that notebook." For so long I hadn't believed her. Now, holding the letter in my hands, I finally did. The story wasn't just about what I lost. It was about what I chose. And from here on, the choice would always be mine. When I look back at everything that happened, the dinners that felt staged, the whispered conversations in hallways, the lies written into bank statements, the silence I lived under for years, it almost feels like I'm talking about someone else's life, but it was mine. Every late night I stayed awake wondering why I wasn't enough. Every shift I worked to pay for second-hand books, every time I convinced myself that maybe love had conditions I would never meet, that was me. And yet, sitting here now, I realize those years, as brutal as they were, carved out the strength I never thought I had. For so long, I believed my worth depended on the approval of people who should have protected me. I believed survival meant silence. I believed that asking for what was mine would make me selfish. But the moment I said what money at that dinner table, something cracked open. I didn't know it then, but that was the first time I allowed myself to demand the truth. From there, step by step, I learned that truth is not the enemy of family, lies are. Truth doesn't break what's whole. It only reveals what was already broken. Walking away from my parents' house was not just leaving a place. It was leaving behind the weight of expectations that had chained me for years. It was stepping into a life where I could choose for myself, not live as someone else's sacrifice. It hurt. It still does. But freedom often begins with pain. I think about my grandmother, often the way she stood taller than anyone in that house, the way her leather notebook became my lifeline. She reminded me that being loved isn't about being useful, and that dignity is worth protecting even if it costs comfort. Her courage gave me a foundation to rebuild on. If you've ever felt like the invisible one in your own family, the forgotten child, the scapegoat, then maybe you'll understand the fire her words lit in me. You are worth more than every dollar in that notebook. I carry that sentence with me every single day. And maybe you're here listening because part of you has lived something similar. Maybe not the stolen money, maybe not the favoritism as stark as mine, but the quiet ache of being overlooked, the sting of being told to sacrifice while others are celebrated. If so, I want to tell you this. You are not wrong for wanting fairness. You are not selfish for needing to be seen. And you are not weak for walking away from those who refuse to treat you with respect. That's why I share this story. Because silence nearly swallowed me whole. Because if someone had told me years ago that speaking up would not destroy me but save me, I might have found courage sooner. If you've listened this far, you already know the power of being heard. So let me ask you something simple. Let me know you're here. Drop a hi in the comments or tell me where you're listening from. Sometimes the smallest acknowledgement, the proof that someone is on the other side of the screen, can remind us we are not alone in these battles. And if my story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own worth or gave you strength to demand the truth in your own life, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Every subscription is more than a number. It's a sign that stories like mine matter, that pain can be transformed into resilience, that voices that were once silenced can finally echo where they are meant to be heard. I don't share this because I want sympathy. I share it because I want connection. I want to believe that even across distance, across time, we can find each other in the spaces where honesty lives. I'm not promising happy endings. Life doesn't work that way. Families fracture, trust crumbles. People disappoint. But what I can promise, and what my story proves, is that broken beginnings don't have to dictate the rest of the journey. You can reclaim what was stolen. You can rewrite what was said about you. You can build something solid out of ruins. So thank you. Thank you for sitting with me in this long confession. Thank you for letting me pour out the parts of my life that once shamed me into silence. And thank you for reminding me that no story, however painful, is wasted if it reaches someone who needed to hear it. This is where I close, not because the story is over, but because this chapter is. Tomorrow, I will write the next one, and maybe tomorrow, you'll write yours.